I've kept an urn in my closet for 3 years. Not because I can't let go. Not because I'm still grieving. But because I know, once I give it up, they'll bury my father in a place he never wanted to go. Next to a woman I truly believe he never loved. My name is Elaine. I'm 46 years old. Every time I open that closet, the urn is still there. Small, white, silent, but heavier than any grief I've ever known. Some people say ashes are nothing, just dust, just the remains of a body. Not to me. To me, they're the final piece of my father. The man who once called me his last light after my mother passed away. My father died from lung cancer. It took him fast, just 2 months. I was the last to hold his hand in that hospital room. He looked at me, didn't say a word, and placed a sealed letter in my hand. I gripped it. To this day, I haven't opened it. I thought I had time, but I didn't know. The real battle wasn't cancer. It began the moment his ashes were divided. My father left a very clear will. It was legally verified, witnessed, even audio recorded. Half of his ashes were to be given to his wife, Diane, my stepmother of 8 years. The other half were for me. Take them to your mother, he said. Let me rest beside the woman I truly loved. I did exactly that, but 3 days after the cremation, Diane called. Her voice was cold steel. Elaine, you're not keeping that part. Who do you think you are? He was my husband. I said, and my father. The man I've loved since before I knew how to read. She didn't care. She sent lawyers. She sent relatives to pressure me. She called the extended family, told them I was selfish, trying to divide the family. But deep down I knew one thing: my father had chosen, and I was going to keep his word. I'm an only child. My mother passed away when I was 28. Since then, my father was everything, the only family I had, my last anchor. He wasn't a talkative man, but he was always there, present in my darkest days, the first to call when I posted a smiling photo online. Are you really okay? Always his first question. He never said, I love you, but every time I came home, he'd be waiting at the alley, holding his old worn coat, his skinny frame silhouetted in the dusk. Eyes lit up like a child, seeing a long-lost toy. I thought he would live that way forever, lonely, but content in the love between us. But then, he met Diane. Diane was beautiful, successful, eloquent. I didn't protest. Who was I to stop my father from being happy? At first, things were fine. He had someone to go to the market with, someone to remind him of his meds. I felt relieved. But after a few months, something changed. He called me less. Diane usually picked up the phone. He's sleeping. He's busy. Gradually, it felt like my father was disappearing from my life. One time I visited unexpectedly. He was sitting at the table alone, staring at a photo of my mother. Are you okay, Dad? He smiled faintly. Just getting through the days. That sentence haunted me. When I found out he had cancer, I froze. Late stage, no treatment possible. Diane told me through a text, the doctors say it's weeks. I flew home immediately. He was frail, barely able to speak. But when he saw me, he gripped my hand tightly. You're the only one I trust, he whispered. I cared for him daily, washed him, fed him, read him books. Diane kept working, kept attending spa appointments. I didn't judge. People cope differently. But I sensed it deeply. My father was waiting for something before he left. And that something was a promise. He said, keep half of my ashes. Bury me beside your mother. I've lived 2 lives, but only one woman I truly wanted to walk with. I cried, not from pain, but from knowing he never stopped loving my mom. He passed on a sunny afternoon, gently like falling asleep. I closed his eyes myself. I didn't cry because I had promised to be strong for him. After the cremation, the lawyer and I divided the ashes according to the will. It was signed. Audio recorded, witnessed. Clear instructions. Diane receives 50% with freedom to decide. I receive 50% with the right to bury them next to my mother, per his wish. No objections. Diane stayed silent. 3 days later, my phone rang at 6 a.m. Diane's voice.
Elaine?
I want your part of the ashes. This division isn't fair. I said, the will is clear. He gave me this half. She scoffed. I was his wife for 8 years. You have no authority. I replied quietly, I was his daughter for 46, and I made him a promise. She paused, then said something I will never forget. Then don't blame me for doing what I must. The next day, I got a letter from her lawyer. She was taking it to court, claiming that dividing ashes was sentimental, not legal, and that as the lawful spouse, she had the only real right. Relatives started calling. Just give it up, they said. He's gone. Don't divide the family. I said nothing. But inside, I was breaking. My father once told me, love isn't just for the living. It's how the living keep their promises to the dead. I didn't give in. I wouldn't break the last promise he asked of me. If they call me selfish, so be it. Because at least I still hold on to one thing: my loyalty to the man who loved me all his life. Diane called me on a Wednesday evening. Her voice was hoarse, cold, and full of fury. No hello, no pleasantries. Elaine, he was our father. You don't have the right to keep that half for yourself. I stayed silent for a long moment. I had expected this call sooner or later, but I didn't expect it to hit like this. I didn't want to argue, but I couldn't pretend I didn't hear. I took a deep breath, answering slowly. Dad was clear in his will. I'm only doing what he asked. Diane scoffed. Her laughter was sharp as glass. The will? You really think your father, while dying, was lucid enough to make legal decisions? You think a lawyer's signature makes this valid? I clenched the phone. My throat tightened. Not from rage, but from pain. She was erasing his dying wish, as if he had no say in his own death. I'm not fighting, I said. I'm just keeping my promise. She hung up without another word, but I knew this was just the beginning. 3 days later, my uncle visited, a stern tone in his voice. Sweetheart, about your father's ashes. Maybe you should consider letting go. Don't be so stubborn. I frowned. You heard the will. He made it clear. He avoided my gaze. But Diane is the legal wife. If this gets public, people will think you're selfish. No one sees intentions. They only see a daughter causing trouble. I smiled bitterly. So, a daughter has no right to her father's ashes? He said nothing, but his silence said it all. I began receiving anonymous messages on Facebook, email, even handwritten letters. Don't divide the family. Your stepmother is grieving too. You're turning ashes into a weapon. I didn't flinch, but I was exhausted. One night, Diane's son, my stepbrother, came to see me. We'd never been close. He called me sis out of politeness, nothing more. That night, he stood at my door holding a Tupperware box of cookies. Mom's been crying for a week. Can you let her have peace? I looked straight at him. Do you think Dad would want me to? He fell silent. No answer. I continued. I'm not keeping these ashes out of spite. I'm keeping them because Dad chose. No one gets to undo that. Not even me. Days later, I received a letter from a lawyer. Diane was suing me, demanding full custody of the ashes for proper burial. I laughed, a weary, hollow laugh. Who goes to court over ashes? But I knew, for Diane, it wasn't about love. It was about control. Friends asked, Elaine, why not just let it go?
Do what I ask. Don't let anyone sway you. Not even family.
In the quiet of my living room, I placed the white ceramic urn, Dad's ashes, on the table. I stared at it for hours. No tears, no words, just one thought. Dad, why does it feel like I'm fighting the whole world alone for you, even after you're gone? It all seemed like a dispute over ashes. Until my aunt, my late mother's sister, came to visit. She looked at me, eyes welling, then whispered, Did you know? Your father once told me he wanted to take you to your mother's grave, but Diane wouldn't let him. I froze. Wouldn't let him? Why? She sighed. She was jealous of a dead woman. My father wasn't the type to dwell on the past, but in the rare moments he spoke of Mom, his voice would tremble. I remember the only time he cried in public. When someone played their old wedding song at a family dinner, he stood up and quietly walked away. I thought his grief had softened, but it hadn't. It had just been silenced. And the one silencing it was his second wife. My aunt continued. Diane never allowed your mother's photo in the house. Anything that belonged to her, teacups, scarves, the old rocking chair, was thrown out and replaced. Your dad once kept a knitted scarf your mother made. Diane found it, tossed it in the trash. He took it back and hid it in his desk drawer. By then, I was shaking, not out of anger, but heartbreak. My father spent most of his life loving one woman, and in the end, he wasn't even allowed to remember her. Now I understood why he called me late at night, why he couldn't sleep, why he always stared out the window. He was being forced to forget the only thing that kept him alive all those years, his memory of her. And now, after his death, Diane wanted to erase the last remnant of that memory, his ashes, and his final request. I started going through his notebooks and papers. I found a small brown leather journal, hidden behind old books, not a diary, just scattered notes. First page. March. Call Elaine. Remind her to keep her word. Another page. Don't let Diane know about burial next to Linda. It'll cause problems. Last page. Shaky handwriting. Dying is not scary. Being forgotten is. I set the notebook down, heart heavy. Now it was clear. Diane didn't fight the ashes because she loved him so much. She fought because she couldn't accept losing to a dead woman. She wanted to bury him beside herself, build a joint grave, a beautiful tombstone with their smiling photos, so people would say, what a happy couple. But it would be a lie. Because my father's heart always belonged to my mother, and it never left her. I was angry, not because Diane was selfish, but because she wanted to erase the truth. After Diane officially filed the lawsuit, things spiraled quickly. I don't know how, but within days, the extended family,
The people I once called uncles, aunts, cousins began calling, texting, emailing. At first, they were gentle. "Elaine, ashes aren't worth all this trouble. Your dad's gone. Why hold on so tightly now? Your stepmother has feelings too. Can't you show compassion?" I quietly replied to each one. Not with anger, just exhaustion. I said, "I'm only doing what Dad asked. It's clearly written in his will." But the more I explained, the angrier they got. And the soft concern turned into accusations. "You're an ungrateful daughter, stirring drama before the dead even find peace. I think you're keeping the ashes out of spite, not love. Have you thought about the feelings of the living? Or is this just your ego?" I stayed silent. Because the more I explained, the more I was misunderstood. No one asked what Dad wrote. No one wanted to hear his final wish. They didn't care about the truth. They just needed someone to blame. And that someone was me. What hurt wasn't their words. It was that I once believed we were family. People who ate together at anniversaries, who gathered by Dad's bedside when he was ill. Now, they saw me as the destroyer, the selfish daughter, the stubborn child. I sat alone in the living room, clutching the urn. The same room where my father once called out on Sunday mornings, "Elaine, did you have breakfast?" No one calls me daughter anymore. No one texts, "Your dad misses you." Just me and the white ceramic urn. Cold, light, but heavy as a world of judgment pressing down on me. One relative even posted on Facebook, "Ashes are not to be fought over. Those who cling are clinging to their own pride." No tags, but I knew who it was for. Friends messaged, "They don't know the full story." I just nodded. That was the day I learned. When you protect the truth, you must accept becoming the villain in someone else's version of the story. I once thought the greatest pain was losing my father. It's not. The greatest pain is realizing you no longer belong anywhere after he's gone. I opened the closet, took out the old scarf my mother had knitted for Dad. He used to hide it from Diane. I now hide it from the world. I wrapped the urn in that scarf, sat down, held it tight. I didn't cry because he died. I cried because I had never felt so alone. 1 week after Diane filed the lawsuit, I returned to my father's old house to sort through his things. It had been closed for nearly 2 months. The air was musty, faint mold. But to me, every wall, every drawer still held the breath of the man who once called this place home. I stepped into his study, small but always neat. The pen still lay where he left it, his notebook half opened. I touched everything gently as if trying to feel him again. I opened the bottom drawer, usually full of bills. But this time, there was an envelope. Just one line on it. "Elaine, open only if I'm gone." My hands trembled. I knew this was the last thing he left for me. I sat on the floor, took a few minutes to steady my hands enough to open it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, his handwriting, slightly slanted to the left, just the way he always wrote. "My daughter, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're alone now. I know you're facing hardship. Diane won't let go easily. But I wrote this letter so you'll never have to doubt again. Please keep my ashes. Bury them next to your mother. Linda Tran was the love of my life. Diane, I'm grateful to her for the company, the effort. But your mother? She was the one I chose, the one I loved from the first moment, the one I never forgot. If you don't do this, my soul won't rest. I trust you. You are the only one who loved without asking anything in return. Love, Dad, David Tran. I couldn't finish it. My body broke down. My heart burst open. Grief, relief, truth, all tangled together. Finally, he had said it. What I had always felt, but never heard. Even after remarrying, after nearly a decade with another woman, his heart had never moved on. I clutched the letter in both hands, trembling. There were no metaphors, no literary flourish, just pain, just truth. Diane may have been the legal wife, but the one he chose to rest beside was my mother, Linda Tran. I went through his old documents. In a wooden file cabinet, I found a land deed under my mother's name and a handwritten application. I, David Tran, request to relocate the grave of my wife, Linda Tran, to a new lot in Northwood Hills Cemetery so that I may rest beside her after death. He never told me about this. It was unsigned, possibly unsent. Maybe Diane didn't approve. But it was clear. He had planned it. He just never got the chance. I took the letter home, made copies, sent one to the lawyer, one to my aunt, one to the uncle who called me selfish. I didn't argue, I didn't explain, I let the letter speak for me. Just silence. And the quiet joining of two people who never stop loving each other. Forever. I still remember that morning as vividly as if it happened yesterday. The sky was strangely, almost eerily blue. The kind of blue that made you pause. No clouds, just an endless ceiling of silence above me. A soft breeze whispered through the trees of Northwood Hills Cemetery, carrying the scent of damp earth and old flowers. It wasn't cold, but I shivered anyway. Not from weather, from what that day meant. I stood there, completely alone, in front of two headstones that had only just been placed. The granite still looked new, sharp, clean. The ground before them had not fully settled. It was uneven, raw, like grief that had just begun to dry around the edges, but still pulsed underneath. There were no flowers placed by others, no visitors, no ceremony. I didn't wear black. No one else did either, because no one else came. It was not that kind of burial. I carried only one thing in my hands, an old knitted scarf. My mother had made it when I was a child. It was gray and soft and a little worn at the edges, the way memories often are. My father used to keep it hidden in his desk drawer, away from Diane, away from questions. Now, I laid it gently over both names carved into stone. Linda Tran, David Tran, and just like that, after all the battles, the silence, the letters, the court threats, the judgment, they were together. Home. No choir sang, no priest spoke, no one wept aloud. But I felt something shift inside the earth. A weight lifted, a circle closed, a silence filled. That morning, I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't grieving, but because peace, true peace, has no sound. It's just stillness. And in that stillness, I felt them both. A month later, I returned to clear out my father's old home. It was the last thing left undone. The house had stood still, untouched since the funeral. No one had entered, not Diane, not the neighbors. It was as if time had drawn a curtain over it and left it sealed. I unlocked the door slowly. It creaked open like something from memory. The air was musty,
dust hung in the sunbeams like silent snow. Everything was exactly as he had left it. The shoes neatly by the door, the slippers turned toward the chair he used to sit in every evening, the mug with faded writing that read, "Best Dad Ever." I walked into the living room and stopped. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel heaviness in my chest. I didn't feel anger or grief or defiance. I felt warmth, like a soft whisper of home. With each step I took, I thought I heard echoes, his gentle cough in the hallway, the familiar scrape of a chair, even my mother's laughter from the kitchen. Ghosts of comfort, not to haunt, but to hold. I found the altar in the corner, dusty and faded. I took 2 photos, one of my father, one of my mother, and placed them side by side. It had been nearly 20 years since they'd last shared space like that. I lit a stick of incense, though I wasn't religious. It wasn't for the gods, it was for them, and maybe for me. And in that moment I whispered, "You're together now." There was no audience, no need for validation, just a quiet knowing that I had done what needed to be done, that my father's soul, after years of silencing, displacement, denial, was finally, utterly at peace. I didn't need applause, I didn't need acknowledgement, because I knew the truth, and the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to survive. Friends asked me after everything if I hated Diane. I thought about it, really thought about it, and then I answered no. Because without her, maybe my father would have spent his final years in utter loneliness. Diane, for all her flaws, her control, her jealousy, her refusal to let go of his image, was present. She cooked, cleaned, took him to appointments. She filled the silence, even if she erased parts of the past while doing it. Sometimes love doesn't survive, but gratitude does. What I could never forgive wasn't her inability to love him the way my mother had. It was her attempt to erase that my mother ever existed. That's the danger of insecurity. It doesn't just want attention, it wants to be the only story. But love isn't a competition. Memory isn't a battlefield, and truth is what we owe the dead. My father wasn't a perfect man. He had regrets, he made compromises, but he was kind, quietly kind. The kind of man who held umbrellas over strangers in the rain, who folded my childhood drawings and kept them in his wallet, who never raised his voice, even when the world disappointed him. He deserved to be remembered, not for the second life he settled into, but for the first love he never let go. Now every morning, I make a cup of tea. I sit by the window he once stared through. I turn on the old radio that still plays those tinny old jazz songs he loved, and I write. I write this story not for vengeance, not to shame anyone, but to remember, to remind. We don't get to rewrite the endings of others just because their truth doesn't fit the version we prefer to tell. Love doesn't need to be loud to last. It doesn't need to be shiny to shine. It just needs to be real and kept. Because some promises, even after the one who made them is gone, must still be honored. As if their soul is watching every step we take, and maybe it is. My father wasn't perfect. He had his flaws, like every human being does. He wasn't the kind of man who commanded a room with his voice, or demanded attention with his presence. He was soft-spoken, steady, and deeply observant. The type of person who'd notice when your shoelace was untied, or when your eyes looked a little more tired than usual. The kind who never forgot to say thank you, who always remembered your favorite tea, who checked the weather before you left the house and handed you an umbrella without saying a word. He didn't change the world. He didn't invent anything extraordinary or become a name people would remember in history books. But he changed my world. And maybe that was enough. What he lacked in grandeur, he made up for in presence, in patience, in the way he held space for people, quietly, with respect. And in that way, he taught me something that I didn't fully understand until after he was gone. That kindness is not weakness. That showing up for others, even in small, consistent ways, is a kind of love that echoes beyond a lifetime. He deserved to be loved, fully, in life and in death. Not edited, not rewritten, not buried under someone else's image of what his legacy should be. He deserved to be remembered as he was, a man who loved deeply, who mourned silently, who held on to the memory of my mother like it was the last ember of warmth in a cold world. Now, every morning, I make a cup of tea, just the way he liked it. Earl Grey, a touch of honey, no milk. I sit by the window where the light filters in the same way it used to in his living room. I turn on the old radio, the one that still hums with static before the music begins, and I let it play those soft jazz tunes he always enjoyed. And then, I write. I write, not out of vengeance, not out of bitterness. I write because memory is fragile. Because silence allows history to be rewritten by those loud enough to reshape it. And I cannot let that happen. Not to him. Not to the man who gave me so much without ever asking for anything in return. This story isn't meant to attack. It's not an indictment. It's a reminder. A reminder that we don't get to rewrite the endings of others simply because their truth is inconvenient, because it doesn't align with the version of the story we want to tell. Love, real love, isn't always cinematic. It doesn't always arrive with fanfare or dramatic. It doesn't have to be grand to be worthy. It just has to be real. And it has to be kept. Because some promises, even when the one who made them is no longer here, must still be honored. Not because of obligation, not because of pride, but because love, at its core, is a vow, a sacred one. And breaking it, even in death, would be a betrayal not just of the person we lost, but of the person we are. I think about that often. I think about the way my father looked at my mother in old photographs, like she was the only thing in the world worth seeing. I think about the way he spoke her name, never loudly, always softly, like it was a prayer he didn't want the world to overhear. And I think about the last time he looked at me, voice low and breath short, and said, "Keep your promise, Elaine. Don't let anyone change it, not even family." That's the thing about promises made in love. They don't vanish. They wait patiently to be fulfilled. And now that it has been, I live with a quiet kind of peace. One not everyone will understand, but I don't need them to. Because this peace isn't for them. It's for me. It's for him. It's for the woman he never stopped loving. Some mornings, when the tea is just right and the sun filters through the window just so, I swear I can feel them both sitting with me. Not ghost, not memories, just presence. Silent, steady, comforting. And maybe that's all love really is. Not a firework, but a steady flame. One you tend to, day by day, even when no one is watching, especially then. This, all of this, is my tending. This is how I remember. This is how I keep him alive. And this is how I keep my word.